Joshua Coburn's formula for success never changes. It's small steps in order to build self-confidence. Whether it be personal struggles, his career at Brownells, or anything in between, the formula has remained consistent. He may have evolved, but he always comes back to those basics. This is the No Excuse to Miss podcast. Welcome to the No Excuse to Miss podcast. I'm your host, Scott Volquartsen, alongside with our Director of Marketing, Chad Wittrock. This week's guest has been in marketing for Brownells. He's been an author, a speaker, an entrepreneur, many times juggling several of these roles simultaneously. And through all that, he's learned to live life on his own terms. Welcome to the show, Joshua Coburn. How are you doing today?
Wonderful, guys. Thanks for having me. Stoked.
Thank you for taking the time. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
You're somebody that I met, I think, 10, 12 years ago at Brownells for a meeting.
Yeah.
And I've always admired the way you do things. And, we'll get into it here a little bit, but everything from what you did there onto your speaking side, the self-help motivational stuff, I dig it all. So before we dive into that, can you just give us a little bit of background on who you were before you entered or started working with Brownells?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just like a small town Iowa boy, just like you guys. And I was working kind of a job in Pellet Corp for those into construction or an Iowan, and just hating life. It wasn't my thing. I also was working in a tattoo shop as a body modification artist, and just decided to pivot, kind of hit bottom a little bit because I wasn't happy with who I was, where I was going, and it just didn't make sense because I wasn't built for like quote unquote factory life. So I just quit my job with no real safety net, just starting the body modification stuff. So I was upside down and growing that with really nothing to look forward to. But weirdly, when I did hit bottom, then Frank and Pete Brownell came into the shop often, and they happened to pester me pretty consistently about doing marketing for them. But I didn't want to work for the man, so to speak. And I told them that, and we all laughed about it. But they were just smarter than me and eventually talked me into working mornings there on the dock and then going into the tattoo shop at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon because I'd work till 10 or midnight or something like that there. So that's kind of how things work. But I was definitely like that angry, like late teen, early 20s guy trying to find my way at that time.
And that kind of leads into a question I wanted to ask is, I always feel like there's one event or something a significant event that happens in somebody's life that at many times when it happens, you feel like it's the worst thing in the world, or how am I ever going to recover from this? But looking back 10, 15, 20 years later, you can always kind of point back to that and be like, that was the tipping point. Do you have something?
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you were describing there?
Yes, absolutely. I guess my headspace at that time was very bad because I took the job that I was working at the factory, which paid very well. I moved up very quickly. I was like 19 years old. And I was making good money for a 19-year-old in a stable job with great benefits and all the things that a lot of people want to have, right? And my dad pushed me to get that job because then I could just live life, right? I could just get the house, the white picket fence, the whole thing. And I just wasn't happy. So what weighed on me, I think, the most, and for years after that, was disappointing my father because I couldn't do it. That's his life. That wasn't my life. So mentally, when I quit that job, I was ready to end my life. Truly, I wrote a note, did the whole thing. And thankfully, my anxiety and mostly anxiety kept me from doing it simply because I had a routine that I had to stick with to keep my shit together. And that just didn't fit the routine, weirdly. So I remember distinctly thinking to myself after I woke up one morning, like, what happens if I take responsibility for my life rather than, because I was about to take responsibility for my death, right? So I was like, what if I take full responsibility for my life, the good, the bad, the other, because I blame my dad for pushing me into this job I didn't like when I could have made the choice to not do that before, but I wouldn't accept that responsibility. So it was that morning that I woke up and decided to take full responsibility for all the good, all the bad, and just move forward, because you can't get worse than bottom. So that was my first kind of step forward.
And it's interesting you talk about that, because later on when you got into like the motivational speaking and different things, so much of it was about self-confidence, zero regrets and all the stuff that it sounds like you didn't have during that time.
Right.
How did you, what were some of the steps that you took along the way to start building up that confidence? What was the biggest one, just deciding that you're done working the corporate job?
Yeah, it was really just a matter of deciding that I was going to live on my terms. And, that included, tattooing my hands, neck, and face at 19 years old, which of course is not the path generally suggested. That was a matter of kind of leveraging my background for what I knew it was worth, rather than kind of struggling with that. Because I think a lot of people do. A lot of people struggle with their personal value. And off and on I have and still do, because I think that's the up and down of life, right? But really the steps to get there was doing simple things, because at that time I had gotten so almost agoraphobic that I didn't even want to leave my apartment. I struggled with it because I just felt judged and like I didn't fit. So even going to the grocery store was a mental struggle for me personally. And as time went on, you start going to the grocery store, you start taking those baby steps and overcoming that. I used to lay by the door to my apartment, just cry because I couldn't, traverse that 3 inches to go outside that door. And like, that sounds silly to people, I'm sure, but especially now that I travel all over the world by myself. But, the path took 20 plus years to get there. And the steps were just very simple. They were tiny. They were sometimes minute by minute. And it was a matter of me simply saying, look, dude, you can do this. It's, if you step out of this comfort zone, you can step back if you have to. And then eventually you're taking 2 steps, and then 3, and then so on. So that's really, and I still do that today. When I'm struggling, I still write quotes and all these things that are just reminders to myself to keep moving forward and kind of keep anxiety at bay, which is hard. It's harder, I would say, today than it was 5 years ago, but easier than it was 20 years ago. So there's a lot of ups and downs. We all have things that we're fighting and dealing with.
And
absolutely.
It's crazy to think that, you would lay by the door and not be able to go outside from there. And later on, to what you became with Brownells, traveling all over, doing these events, becoming the speaker, getting up in front of a crowd.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
that's
truly,
it's a journey.
It is. And I know, you guys have been there to see it some of the time. And there's a vast difference between, being stuck at home or being afraid to go to the grocery store and standing in front of 5,000 people and entertaining them for 2 hours. And if nothing else, that is simply proof that it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or what you're dealing with. It can be done if you want it bad enough. You just have to work for it. And I think that's the biggest problem I see in people, is they're not willing to put in that work. They think it comes easy. With social media, everybody sees kind of the end result. Nobody likes to share that in-between journey, when in reality, the best things about life are that journey, that the ups and the downs and the whole thing. So I don't know, those that don't want to work or think that it just comes easy, just don't see the 18 years or the 10 years, the 10-year overnight success, right? You hear about that a lot, but that's real. That's how it works.
And the one thing that I've always found too is when you focus on just an outcome or a goal, once you get there, there's going to be another goal out there. There's going to be something else that you want. So if you don't learn to enjoy that process of getting there, you're going to always be miserable because you're never going to be at the end.
Yes, 100%. And it's really funny, because where I'm at this point in my life is like, I can see the end. I can enjoy the things because my bucket list has been checked off over and over and over and over again. And at this point, I can finally sort of settle in and enjoy things for what they are. I have been terrible at that. And now I'm learning about what that means. Where, maybe you guys or others, with families and kids, because I never had that until a few years ago, have learned a lot of those lessons, maybe 20 years ago, where I'm learning them in my 40s, and it's different, but it's a beautiful shift of gears, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it does. How much, for those that know you, they also know that you went through a physical transformation over the last probably 5-6 years. I might have that time frame wrong, but
that's about right. Yeah.
If you look at pictures from you 10, 15 years ago to who you were or who you are now, there's no comparison. I mean, you dialed things in. How important was that to go along with like the mental transformation that you were making?
Yeah. It's funny because I was coming out of a divorce, my second divorce, because if there's anything I'm good at, it's being bad at relationships. And coming out of that, I knew that I had to keep myself on target mentally, and I'm still speaking. And that was growing substantially, and it made sense for me to be physically on point as much as I talked about being mentally fit. And when I dove into that, I really went into it thinking I just need, I don't need to be sitting around drinking all day and, drowning my sorrows. I need to be turning this into something positive. And that's what I did. And it didn't take long. I started getting sponsorships and all this crazy stuff. And of course, like with everything I do, something I was passionate about became work. But it helped me mentally so much, because talk about maintaining confidence when, you're at your peak. I mean, I was 40 almost and at my peak, like better than I ever was at 16 or 18 or 22, 40 years old. And at peak is a pretty crazy place to be, especially when you're 20 and you think that's old, right?
Yeah. One thing I really like about that story, Josh, and going back to what you said earlier about being kind of agoraphobic and trying to get out of your apartment, that all kind of started with getting a gallon of milk and coming back, right? And kind of the same thing with your fitness journey that I thought was fascinating is you didn't run out, hire a trainer, get a couple gym memberships, dial in 5 or 6 diet plans. You had some free weights in a basically garage, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's how
like a detached garage. It wasn't a remodeled garage with a gym in it. It was a detached garage with some free weights. So kind of following that process one step at a time.
Yeah. And I
taking the small steps.
I think that's exactly where things have to go for people, because like I said, everybody looks at the end of the journey, sees people in these high end fitness, gyms and, kicking ass and hooked up to all these things with non-rusted weights. But no, everything for me starts very organically. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it was this dusty, rusted out, nasty garage with weights that would stain my hands. And then eventually I got a gym membership. And then from there, eventually got on a good diet plan. Once I kind of slowly learned, I started by looking up, exercises on Instagram and doing research on Google and just showing up, because that's, again, it's about the work. I could have gotten, on a meal plan, could have gotten a gym membership, could have gotten a trainer right away, but that's a lot of change all at once. And sometimes that's what turns people off, because it's too much. So if you start just limping along, eventually you just learn it. You kind of start to figure it out. And that's exactly the way I handle everything.
And I think if you limp along and slowly start to figure things out, all those other areas start to come in too. Mm-hmm. Where if you try to do them all at once, it never happens. But if you start small, all of a sudden you notice it spread into every area, your nutrition, your diet, your everything.
Yeah, 100%.
So maybe that answers my next question. You said when you were working at the tattoo shop, Pete and Frank Brownell would come in and they wanted you to come into the marketing. Is that kind of how you built your career at Brownell's too, is just like one step at a time after hearing your story there?
Yes, 100%. It's weird, but everything, now that I'm thinking about it, it's bringing a lot of perspective talking to you guys, but that's exactly how that started. Those guys would come in to the tattoo shop and just hang out. They're very cultured. They understand, all sorts of different facets of life. So they'd come in and hang out and talk. And at the time I owned a small record label. I was publishing books back then. And as time went, they started asking like, hey, you're doing all this. I don't know how you do it. Are you profitable? All the questions that any entrepreneur asks. And they're like, we need some fresh blood. We need to see new things. Like, so why don't you come work for us? I was like, no, because I'm traveling and enjoying my life and doing all this crazy shit. I don't want to work corporate. But eventually, yeah, they brought me in. I started working on the dock because they're just like, why don't you just come for a while every day and it'll be fine? Like me being 19, not getting what their big picture plan was. So I did that, work part-time. As I moved through the company, I started there, then started managing another warehouse area, then went to customer service and the call center. And then from there started developing new products. And then the internet of all things becomes a thing. And now they need a promotions team, which, like the new products thing wasn't a thing really. We started the merchandising team, then promotions wasn't a thing. So we developed that. And then social media wasn't a thing. So we developed that whole thing. And now we have teams for every one of those areas. So it's really cool to always be on the tip of that. And yeah, to your guys' point earlier, it started very organically from the bottom up. And I got to learn the industry inside and out, learn the company inside and out. And it's crazy. Things just always come full circle. And I was back at headquarters last week, and it was crazy to hear the stories from 20 some years ago from some of the guys who've been there as long as me. It's insane.
Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just gonna say, it's even crazy. Like, when you look at the old Brownells building in Montezuma,
mm-hmm.
and you toured that and went through that to what they've done at HQ now in Grinnell.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's insane. That place is beautiful. And
yeah,
I can't imagine Bob Brownell, when he started, however many years ago it was, ever envisioned that building sitting on Interstate 80 like it is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was like 83 years ago or something like that. But what's really insane is his vision, though, was still the same. He started on, what was it, Highway 6, I think, old Highway 6, because that was the biggest thoroughfare at that time. And that's where, everybody was driving past. And it only makes sense that, his business started to shrink as Interstate 80 was built. And here we are now on the U.S.'s, biggest thoroughfare once again, because the idea is the same. It just so happens that, the world changes, but we adapted.
And the one thing from the outside looking in that I always think is pretty neat, like when I look at like Frank or Pete Brownell, is as you guys came along, they've always, prior to that, they were a pretty conservative company in the way they marketed and everything.
Yeah.
To give you guys, and maybe you don't think it was free reign, but from the outside looking in, it looked like almost some free reign to try new things that, are pretty outside the box even for our industry as a whole when you guys start doing them.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Was it an urban legend, Josh, on that note? Is it an urban legend that one of your first campaigns involved zombies?
Yeah, I can jump into all that. But yeah, I mean, to your point, they are maybe were viewed. I don't know. They could still be viewed as a company being fairly conservative, but in reality, it's about, I mean, yes, conservative in many ways. I don't want to get into politics or anything, but
yeah.
If you walk in there, often the person at the front desk that you're going to see is a young lady who's covered from jawline all the way down in tattoos. And that doesn't sound like something that would ever happen in our industry because it's a bunch of old guys in sport coats, right? That's the vision many people have. And that's not how Brownells is. And that did start with me because I was heavily tattooed already when I started. And as they moved me through the company, I would like to think that my background and my choices proved out a lot of theories and things. And there's a certain trust there that I still to this day don't take for granted. And I would absolutely say we were given pretty free reign. As long as I could kind of prove out my thoughts and prove that it matched with the overall vision, it was basically a go. And, we didn't have hits every time. You can't always have hits, but we learned and we'd pivot and we'd go again. And yeah, I mean, the zombie thing you speak of, that was the very first big fully integrated cross-channel campaign Brownells ever did. And initially I was told I couldn't do it. And the joke was you can do it as long as you do it with no budget. So I did it without a budget and actually ended up making money before we even launched because of that. If they would have said no, then that's one thing. But they said jokingly, you can do it without a budget. So I ended up working with a bunch of industry friends to create this cool kind of trailer. And it was 10-second trailer for this campaign that I did with our video team, all under the radar. And then we showed the trailer at a meeting, and everybody was so stoked because they couldn't believe how over the top and crazy it was and how they wanted to see that movie, right? Quote unquote. And I mean, it wasn't a movie. It was just a campaign. And we built a whole integrated, fully interactive video game website where you could shop and all this stuff, all on zero budget and all because they said no, and only if you do it without a budget. So that was ultimately my launch into, the crazy, fun, different stuff that Brownells does. And I'm thankful for that because, I mean, let's be honest, technically that would be defying orders, right? And I could have been canned for something like that, but thankfully it panned out. And, I'm always the guy that would much rather ask forgiveness than permission. And thankfully it worked.
Well, and it goes back to building that self-confidence and having that confidence in yourself to be willing to run with it and let the chips fall kind of where they may, but still know that you did it, the best way you could have. Right.
Absolutely. And with the right intentions. I think intent matters a lot. It wasn't about, me being great and getting attention, because honestly, I just laid the foundation. It was everybody else on that team that made it happen successfully and believed in it beyond me. Mm-hmm. So, that really mattered and trusted me enough to go along with it, because it could have been an issue for them.
Yeah. I was just going to say they had to have a lot of belief in you, because that might not seem so far out there in 2022.
Right.
But back when you guys did that was, pretty far out there from what our industry was used to. Like you said earlier, we're used to old men in sport coats.
Right. Yeah.
Doing the exact same thing over and over again.
Yes, it was. I mean, and this is pre, bearded tattooed dudes coming back from the sandbox. This was, pre uber tactical social media stuff. This was like,
it was even pre Walking Dead popularity, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was right in line with that. It was right
in line with that.
So, but that's the other piece. That was before people understood in our industry that aligning with what's popular in culture is extremely important to getting, proper SEO, to getting attention on podcasts, to getting, magazine coverage and all those things. Because if you're not kind of catering a little bit to what's popular, then what's the reason people have to talk to you? Like there's no reason, because you're just somebody in the central Iowa doing, shipping shit out of a warehouse. Well, that's fine if you're great at it, but there's a whole other component to that, and you have to have people talking.
And I think that's something you guys have always done well. And, we've even talked about internally is hitting like some of those fringe markets that were historically not like firearm target demographics, but they have that crossover appeal. You guys, were involved with the UFC early, or, some of the UFC fighters doing different events, bringing in some of those outside people into our industry.
Yeah.
Which I always think has been, it's something we've tried to duplicate here, just because I think exactly to your point, if we're constantly marketing, in that echo chamber, how do we ever grow?
Right. 100%. And at the end of the day, I don't care what anyone has to say. We need to be growing together, whether it's us and you guys, or it is, as much as I'll probably get slapped on the wrist for this, even our competitors to some degree, we have to be aligned with on some level, because politically we have a fight ahead of us always as well. And if we're not all trying to reach the biggest audience with a positive message of the Second Amendment, we're all going to fail, and none of us are going to have this anyway. So we have to have some sort of unity. And the more we can spread that message to different people and different cultures, the better off we're going to be.
And the other part of that I've always said is, overall, we're a pretty small community. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to be at events, whether it's on the range, at a trade show, where we're going to be set up next to our competitors.
Yeah.
And to me, it's always much easier, at least having a working relationship with them or respect for them.
Right. Yeah.
Because you might spend, we've done events at Brownells where we spent 2 or 3 days standing next to our competitors, where if we weren't able to talk to them, it becomes an awkward, long,
right.
Weekend. And I think that eventually ends up, transferring over to the customers. They can feel that tension.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I mean, good on you guys for consistently being aware of that. And I mean, being aware of just the energy in the room too, that matters. That's a huge thing. So if you can say your hellos and give the handshakes and fist bumps and, be all copacetic for things, because it's going to be all right. There's enough for everybody, especially if we're all marketing and doing our job properly anyway. I mean, look at yes, there's a zillion gun owners out there, but look at the number that isn't. That's a lot of people we can reach, right?
Yep.
Yes. So how do you think the industry has changed from like when you started at Brownells to where we're at now?
Oh my gosh. It's crazy. Like I remember my very first SHOT Show, and Pete Brownell actually just reminded me of this. He was telling the story the other day when I was at headquarters. My very first SHOT Show, I was standing there. My hair was really long and black. I had a short beard, but my neck is fully tattooed up to my jawline. And I had a big septum piercing in the center of my nose. So like I stood out like a sore thumb amongst the, amongst the white Midwestern sport coat wearing regular dude, and I remember a gentleman came up and I was standing there talking to somebody and came up to Frank Brownell, who was standing near me, and said, "Who the hell brought the circus to town? Do these guys know anything?" And Frank said, "You mean that guy?" pointing to me. And I, of course, overheard all this and turn and look at the conversation. And Frank said, "He's one of my guys, and he's a damn bulldog. He gets everything done I need him to get done." And the guy, and if you guys know Frank, he did that with very little subtlety. And the guy, of course, kind of scurried off, and Frank gave me a little smirk, and I gave one back, and I was just like, okay, so here we are. I have the blessing of the guy in the corner office, so I guess forward we march, right? But that was the overall thought. I remember walking around SHOT Show and other events just standing out like a sore thumb, and that's okay. I remember my very first meeting with a very large rifle company, and they walked in and I introduced myself and their jaws dropped. They're like, "You're the Josh that we talk to all the time on email and on the phone?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And I just kind of threw it out there. I was like, "So I'm not what you expected then?" And they're like, no, not at all, And now today, I would say that, heavily tattooed, bearded dudes in 5'11" pants is the norm. But that was me, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it's been. And in terms of kind of the generalized acceptance of who 2A is for, because it's for everybody, right? But
yes.
Back then, we tended to not believe that because of the echo chamber. But now you see, LGBT rights groups talking firearms. You see the African-American community talking firearms, the Asian community talking firearms, all, Latino communities. Why? Well, because it's for everybody, because we all have the same interest, which is protecting our home, protecting our family, and maybe going after game to feed them. Like, we all have it. So the big change for me, honestly, in the industry is seeing the physical change of who's showing up, because it's all these people, and hearing the conversations amongst those people and realizing again that there's so much unity there. We're all here for the same damn reason, rather than the kind of, and you still see it on social media where, like my favorite thing to watch is if, and you guys know, you post a young lady on social media who's training, she's a gun bunny, right? If she's of average weight and height, she's a gun bunny. Doesn't matter how great she is and how hard she trains, that's what she is. You post a woman who's at the range maybe for the first time, not in amazing shape, and has a family of 5 she wants to protect, it just got a divorce, then she is a gross fat pig and ugly and disgusting. And it's like, no, that's not what either of these women are. They are human beings who are wanting to advocate for 2A and trying to protect their family. But that's not what, some people in our community believe. So we tend to eat our own a lot. but I would say that it's much less than it's ever been before. So that was a really long answer to your short question.
No, but I agree with that because, I've seen that as well. In the 25 plus years I've been going to SHOT Show is, the people that are coming, it's a completely different conversation that we're having many times than it was, 20 years ago, which is why I think it's so important to get out and do events, because it's easy to sit back in the shop and just assume you assume what's going on and who the audience is and who the customers are. But when you can get out and actually talk to them, meet them, find out their stories.
Right.
To me, that's what becomes special about in-person events.
And that's why I think we always strive for like that, that educate consumers, educate people at those events, use that as an opportunity for people to learn, and take them along the journey. And kind of to your point of social media, it's the same thing. If someone uses the wrong terminology in a video or on a post, they got a new firearm or their first firearm, use the wrong terminology, and people jump on them, they don't want to stick in the community for very long.
Right. Yeah.
So, being able to educate, from a place, of caring and taking a new firearms owner along, I think can make all that difference. Same thing at the events.
Right. Yeah, I agree, because the people, somebody new that's talking about a striker fired pistol and calls, the striker a firing pin. Like, everybody dives into the comments and it's like, number one, is it a huge deal? Yeah, maybe if you're trying to upgrade and you're searching for a replacement part, it's a huge deal because you got to get the right thing. But it's very easy to jump into comments and criticize when instead you could just send a message and be like, hey, heads up, this is what it's called. I noticed you called it out as this, but, in the future, just so you know, so then not so many people jump on your comment and ride your ass.
And I think we have to remember everybody has to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I always equate it to like going to the gym for the first time.
Right.
Even when you walk in the gym and you see the big jack dudes or, the in shape women, whoever it is, they all started somewhere. They had to have somebody teach them. They had to ask, the quote unquote dumb question at some point.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in the firearms industry. If they're not allowed to ask questions and learn, why would they ever want to stay in it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, part of that comes from kind of the approach, right? I approach everything like I'm the dumbest dude in the world because there's always somebody that knows way more than me. So, and I'm no expert either. I mean, I've been in the industry for a long time, but I can't talk, history of the PKM or, all this crazy stuff. I don't know. I just don't, I'm not that guy, not yet anyway. And I tend to come in asking the questions instead of like, this is what I know and trying to flex, because all I can do is learn. And if I do have to do like a review or something like that, I would preface it with, this is my approach and this is why, and this is the reason I'm talking about it. And this is how it applies to me. So everybody understands, like, look, I'm not going into this as an expert. I'm not here to try to kick ass and say I'm the best. I'm trying to tell you what I know. And if you can educate me, please feel free to do so. So approach and, again, intent makes a whole lot of difference.
Yeah, and I made that mistake for years, and I've talked about it before, is growing up in the industry, I thought when I was younger, I had to know everything about every firearm. And I would bluff my way through a lot of that just because I didn't want to seem like I didn't know what the hell I was talking about.
Right.
And it wasn't until I got past that and started asking questions, that everything started changing a little bit because, like you said, there's always somebody you can learn from as long as you're willing to say, I don't know.
Right. 100%. And I totally get the like young guy kind of bravado that gets in most of our way at some point. And because I used to be that way too. And it's like, at this point, I just don't care. I don't have anything to prove. I don't really care what anyone thinks about me at all at this point. And if they think I'm a dumbass that doesn't know anything about firearms, well, they can think that. Like, I don't know that I could even change that anyway, other than through time and additional conversation. So if my asking questions is a problem to them, well, chances are good I'm not going to be around them too much anyway, because that's not the negativity I need.
And it's crazy to see how full circle you've come from a guy laying at your door, not wanting to leave because he didn't want to be judged.
Right.
To somebody that now can and a lot of people say, I don't care what people say.
Right.
But most people still do. But I think the way you've lived your life over the last few years and some of the things you've done, you've truly gotten to that point that, you don't need others' approval to make you happy.
Right. That's exactly it. And like I said, I don't ask permission to anybody for anything, for better or for worse, but I don't. We're here to live one life. It's not going to last long as maybe we thought it was or would be. The older I get, the shorter it becomes every single damn day. So I'm going to try to live it to its fullest. And if I were worried, man, about what everybody thought, gosh, I'd have to delete myself from the planet for a while because there's criticism everywhere.
Yes. So let's kind of talk, that's probably a good segue into some of the stuff you're doing now. You're still working for Brownells.
Yep.
But, also you started a new business with, is it Dissident Cigars?
Yep. Yeah. Dissident Cigars. Right. Yep.
You and your wife have moved to Nicaragua.
Yes, sir.
So walk us through a little bit of that decision-making of picking up and moving, not just out of state, not just, to a different lifestyle, but a completely different country.
Yeah. Per usual, I don't do anything halfway. Right. So, it really came down to, I had always planned to move to Baja, Mexico, right? Just live on the coast in a damn Connex box or something that I converted and enjoy watching the whales and the dolphins play and outside a little village that I could probably walk to, right? But of course, with a family and kids, that plan has to be stretched out farther because, nobody dreams of sitting around in the dirt on the coast, maybe, but me. But my wife and I traveled to Nicaragua because we are cigar enthusiasts, and we went to our favorite cigar factory for a tour, which is Oveja Negra, and toured it, enjoyed it, really fell in love with Nicaragua itself. And the owners, James and Angela Brown, invited us down to the small town we now live in, where they live, and we just fell in love with it. And we looked at each other, and my wife and I were kind of like, wow, this is beautiful. We could totally maybe retire here. And we went back home, talked to the kids about it, thought, maybe we'd come down for vacation, see if they liked it, and if they did, maybe we could talk about where things would go from there. Then COVID hit, of course. So we told the kids, things got to wait. And our vacation was effectively canceled. But a few months later, the kids had done all their due diligence and all the research about going to Nicaragua and said, well, why don't we just move? Why don't we just go there and stay there? And Cynthia and I looked at each other like, holy shit, okay, this is pretty crazy. We could do this now. We don't have to wait till we're in our 60s. But the kicker here is, if you bring in a dog, and we had a large dog, you're in until that dog passes away or you choose to leave them there, which we would never do. So this wasn't a light decision. It's not like you can just jump back and forth if you have pets associated with you. But we made the decision, sold everything but a suitcase each, including our teenage kids, which is pretty massive to ask. But again, they understood it. And we moved. We worked with our dog, Jake, which is a huge European Doberman. And he became a service dog in a very short time and flew down with me in the cabin of the plane, got across the borders, and here we are, right? So it just seemed like a perfect, beautiful, laid-back paradise. And it absolutely is. It's crazy beautiful here. But the journey to the cigar business was a little different because we didn't come down here because we were going to buy a cigar company. We just kind of, over time, continued to talk with James and Angela at Oveja Negra, who also own Black Label Trading and Blackworks and Emilio, which are cigar brands. And we had heard that Dissident was available because it was an established, successful, but very small boutique cigar company. And it was available. And we were talking investments and other things with the Browns. And I was talking about how I prefer not to invest in stocks and all this stuff. I'd prefer to invest in people, right? In brands and in things. Because if they're passionate, that's going to win all day compared to, just a stock, which I get that, yes, that's investing in people down the line, but it doesn't connect mentally or.
A lot of games can be played on that side.
Yes.
Yep.
So I like the idea of investing in smaller companies. Well, we found out Dissident was available, and if we didn't take it, it was effectively going away. So Sin and I talked about it. It's like, well, it's a good investment. It's called Dissident Cigars, so I don't know how more fitting considering we've lived our lives as, outside the norm our whole lives, both of us. So it just fit. Everything fit. And we've been smoking Dissident cigars for years, so we knew they were great. So back in December, we rebranded and launched the company, and now here we are several months later, and our first big shipment drops in a couple of weeks to the U.S. as an import, though you can still buy Dissident in the U.S. now. And so it's just moving forward, just lots of big strides and new things,
So how do you juggle your time then, and manage between everything that you have going on?
That's a great question. I'm terrible at it. If there's anything I'm bad at, it's managing time with my family, with Brownells and Dissident. And then, we have both of our own personal brand businesses that we deal with too. So it's very tough. I am learning that it's a matter of focus. It's not a matter necessarily of time management, because sometimes, Brownells takes a week of my time for 12 hours a day, every day, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's, straight 8, you're done. The weekend's pretty slow. But then Dissident requires a lot of time or whatever else. So it's more a matter of focus than it is a matter of time. Because, if I'm with my family, it needs to be family time. If I'm working on Brownells, I need to focus there so it gets all my attention. So I'm terrible at time management. I'm terrible at balancing things. And I'm terrible at focusing, because when I'm with my family, I'm thinking about work. When I'm dealing with work, I'm thinking about my family. But that's my current struggle right now is to learn how to focus. Because like I said a bit ago, and I can't remember if it was prior to jumping on here or not, but as younger guys with families, you learned a lot of the things that I'm learning today at 40 and or in my 40s. So it's a bit of a challenge for me today to implement those things that you guys, from the outside anyway, seemingly have mastered. I mean, you guys are both great dads with, great families that are just kicking ass. Everybody's doing well. And now I get to learn how to be that and figure out that balance and focus.
That working with or living, with intention is definitely, I think an ongoing, I don't want to say struggle, but ongoing process and ongoing adaptation, if you will, almost from day to day.
Yes.
We had a couple of weeks ago, we had Aaron Hind, the CEO of Life Aid, on our podcast.
Wow.
And he had some, what I thought was great advice. He said, you're never going to be able to balance everything perfectly. Mm-hmm. He's like, like you said, at certain times, Brownells is going to require 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
He's like, but what I can control is being intentional with my time when I'm doing a certain task. Mm-hmm. Like in his case, if he's with his family, he's with his family.
Yeah.
Knowing that it might only be a half hour or an hour out of the day. Yeah. He's like, I have to be intentional with that time to them.
Right.
And then when I'm at work, I have to be intentional there and not be thinking about family. But it's so hard to do because I struggle much like you. Yeah. When I'm at home, I'm thinking about work. When I'm at work, I'm thinking about the kids and the family.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. And the other piece of that too is, in theory, all this works, pretty easily and takes care of itself. But, then you have a kid that's struggling in school or struggling with themselves, or, a wife that's diagnosed with something, or you have a medical issue, and all that kind of in theory stuff that can be a well-oiled machine has a wrench, and you have to figure that out too. And the world doesn't stop for you. And that's the hard thing to balance. Like the business continues, social media continues, your family continues, but you have to figure all that out. It's tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, then you're managing your personal brands and everything on top of that.
Yep.
But I'd have to imagine, like, through everything that you've done, all the different endeavors you've taken on, sometimes on your social media, you'll post these stories that you get from people that follow you that'll say, your message, either changed my life, or in some cases I've seen you post, it saved my life.
Right. Yeah.
It's what I needed to hear what does that mean to you that, after all that you went through as, especially in your late teens, early 20s, to know that you have that kind of effect on people that you get those messages?
Yeah. Boy, it's hard to process on every level, because I'm just some dude living his life and sharing in hopes that others understand that they're not alone. And even if they feel weird and out of place, because I always do. There's never a time I ever feel less like an alien on this planet. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think everybody has their version of that, right? And we all are going through things. And I guess I share that stuff because I'm human. And I think it's necessary because I didn't feel like anybody was out there when I was a kid. So that's why I do it. To hear the feedback like that, though, I can't say it's like unexpected because I get it. But to process that, like that is, to hear somebody say, "You saved my life," like that phrase is so profound, right? Or I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. I can't take that lightly. And to process that is humbling and overwhelming and amazing. But I don't know still to this day how to fully approach that. I don't even know how to accurately answer the question. I mean, it feels wonderful. It feels fulfilling. It feels amazing. But that's, to me, so much bigger than me. Like these things happen because of my father and my grandmother and the people that came before me that lived the way they did so I could have the lessons that I've had. And I guess my hope is that individual who said that I saved their life, that whoever comes to them now can say the same thing about them. Because, I mean, my ego isn't so big to think that my legacy is going to last more than a couple of generations, because that's about what it is for most of us, right? And the goal here is that, 5 generations from now, people may not know where it came from, but they'll know the effect of it. They'll understand the value of it. And they'll know, I learned this from my dad or my brother or this family friend who down the line may have heard it from somebody else who got it from me. And I guess that's the way I look at everything. That's what's most important. But to process it, I don't even know. I remember one time, actually, I was with you, Chad, in Barnes & Noble, and I got one of those messages.
Yeah, I remember that, actually.
Yeah. And, I don't know. I just remember sharing it and being like,
I think we had to pause, because you really didn't know how to respond. I don't think at that, if I remember it correctly, at that time, it was pretty heavy, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it is heavy because, if somebody's on their way out and there's something they see that changes their mind, it's heavy. Heavy is a great word, and I can't live my life by carrying that responsibility either. So there's a couple of sides to that. I'm thankful though. I'm very humbled by it.
Does it in some ways, though, offer you freedom for you to keep sharing your story and not caring what other people, the quote unquote haters say, because on the other side of it that even if you have 99 haters, if you have one person that you saved their life,
yeah,
does that give you a freedom, or I don't want to say permission, but yeah. I don't care what people say because I know I'm helping.
Right. Yes. 100% it does. And something I constantly have to remind myself now that I'm in my 40s is that I owe nobody nothing. And I have nothing to prove at this point. I proved to myself. I proved to those I thought I had to prove. And I don't owe anybody anything. Now I can just give freely. I know how little I can live with. So money and things, all of that becomes pretty irrelevant when your mission is to give back, whether it's to, here in Nicaragua, we work to save animals a lot. We work with a veterinary clinic that helps save cats and dogs, street dogs, etc. My wife is out with the whales, and we're both doing our stuff on social media to help people. At the end of the day, that's what all of us are here for. And the freedom to do that, to share, to be honest, and not worry about the haters, because you're going to have them. And I don't owe them anything. So, And eventually they'll become fans anyway, because they're only hating because they're unhappy, right? They don't understand how to deal with a certain piece of their life. And those that comment and bitch, I usually just DM them. I'm like, bro, I don't know what your problem is, but if you need to talk about it, I'm here. And sometimes they're like, oh man, I'm so sorry, I'm just having a bad day. And it's just like, that's all it is. Like they're not really bad people. They're just having a shit day. So yeah, I mean, it totally gives me freedom. And I guess I've never taken that for granted either, because, the more people you touch, the more that kind of positive army grows, and that's huge too. If you're going to make an impact, start with one and let them make an impact on two for you. So.
Yeah. Yep. That's incredible. Speaking of the freedom, I don't think you were a very materialistic guy before you moved.
Right.
But when you had to downsize, everybody to one suitcase per person.
Yeah.
Did that also give you like some sort of freedom that you were no longer tied to all these material things that we get wrapped up in too often?
Absolutely. I kept basically one kind of memento that I achieved over the years that mattered to me that I'll pass on. But otherwise, I realized the other day when we were talking that in the last year, I purchased only 3 books and food and a cigar business, right? A business. I didn't purchase a t-shirt, a pair of pants, socks. I think I may have gotten a pair of shorts, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But that's it in a year. That's all that I purchased for myself. And, it's not even a consideration because, number one, we don't need all the things. It tends to be an anchor, right? It's like, gosh, I'd love to move to this beautiful house, but is it worth it? Or is it worth downsizing? I don't know if I can part with this. Like all these considerations. But, if you're laying in a nursing home, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about, I can't wait till my kids drop in and see them this afternoon. You're not thinking about that thing in a box in the attic. That's not even a consideration anymore. And we can do that at any stage of our life. So to be able to do that, not only with myself, but have the whole family do it, it was awesome. It's so free because, at any time, if we chose to leave where we live at right now here in Nicaragua and move, to another part of town or another city, we could do that in a day. It'd be awesome. It's crazy to think about. A couple of trips, everybody's good.
I'm saying it's got to be like so freeing when you do go on a trip.
Oh, I had to borrow pants for my son when I went to Texas because I didn't have any. Like these are things that it's just like I put a t-shirt on for you guys. That's kind of a big deal, right? Normally I'm in shorts and a hat, and that's about it doing work. Because you just don't need anything. Like people here live. It's a poor country. They don't live with much, but they're stoked every night to drive by their small hand-built homes, and everybody's sitting outside as a family talking and laughing on dirt floors, but they're stoked. I don't see that in America, in the suburbs driving around. I don't see families outside interacting and having a blast together. I see kids on video games, parents staring at their cell phones, and no interaction most of the time, and that sucks. We're trying to be better about that since we've been here.
Yeah, well, I think this for sure. I think the scary thing, when you start looking at material things, is so many times it's trying to fill this gap or this hole that's there, and you might work hard for it and acquire that thing, and then you suddenly realize, I always wanted this car, but now I really would rather have this car.
Right.
You want to level up one more time. It very temporarily filled that gap or that hole that you wanted or thought you needed filled.
100%.
And I think many times we get wrapped up in that material thing's going to make us happy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where, at least in my opinion, you have to be happy, and those things may add to it down the road or might be something you can enjoy.
Right.
But they're not going to make a person happy.
They're not going to substitute for authentic happiness. Right.
Yes. Or like you said, if they do, it's going to be very temporary, very short-lived, and then it's on to the next thing, which requires many times more work, more
sacrifice, more money, whatever the case may be.
And for what in the end is always my question. Like at this point, for me, like I'm a watch guy. I love watches. I only have, I think, 4, right? And they're not all terribly expensive except for one. I would love to kind of upgrade that, but it's not because I need another watch. It's because I know that I can hand it off to one of the kids in 10 years and it can be that thing, like that guiding light of, hey, I know times are rough, but he worked his ass off for this. And if he can do that against all odds, I can do X, so that's kind of how I see those things that I've held on to. But yeah, the thought of like the vehicle we drive now is a 2006 Prado, Land Cruiser Prado, right? 2006. If I bought that in the States, everybody would be like, oh my God, 2006, you're insane. There's no value in that. And it's like, no, there's not, but there doesn't have to be, because you know what? It gets me from point A to point B. It's 4-wheel drive, takes me on the mountain roads here, and everybody's happy. Tons of parts available because things aren't just thrown away here. And it's going to get rebuilt 100 times more, just like it has 100 times before. And, at the end of the day, it gets the job done. And I think that's like that utilitarian mindset is what's most important to me at this point. Does it help me? No, it's gone.
Yep. Well said.
Very well said. Well, where can people find you, like to learn more about you personally, the cigar company? I think most of our listeners probably knows where to find Brownell. So
best places to find me. You can just go to joshuacoburn.com. That's got all my social media and all the things, but otherwise just search my name, Joshua Coburn. You'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the socials. And that's where I'm most active at is Facebook and Instagram. So you'll find me primarily there. So,
well, this has been awesome. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you.
You got anything else, Chad, before we go?
No, I think that's it. I definitely recommend if anyone out there is a cigar aficionado or likes to sample good cigars, Dissident. I've sampled a couple now. They are amazing. So I can attest to that.
Awesome.
And we glossed over it, Josh, but you wrote a book. What's the name of the book if people want to check that out?
Well, the latest book is Shit That Needs Said, So You Can Kick All the Ass. The artwork in it's stellar, thanks to my friend Chad on this show. But yeah, you can that right now, since I've moved, it's out of print. We'll probably bring it back at some point.
Okay.
But you can find it on the secondary market. And weirdly, I saw it not long ago running for like $300 on eBay. So it's a big deal,
awesome.
Chad.
That's awesome. Great. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah. Well,
is Inspiration on Demand available anymore either? I meant to ask you that earlier.
Yeah. Inspiration on Demand, I think, is still available on Amazon. I believe it is. Yeah. I think you can still get it on Amazon. Gosh, I'm the worst. Like that's, yes, I wrote books. Do I even know if they're available now? Shit, I don't know. It will be eventually back. I just got to figure out logistics of all that because we still want to be able to sign them all and personalize them all as much as possible. But nobody wants to wait 6 months for a personalized book either. So, you got to figure all that out. But we'll get there. But thanks for the shout out on that, Scott.
Yeah, I've read it. I enjoyed it.
Awesome.
If you can find it, I recommend it. And like I said, thank you again for taking the time. Obviously we talked about time management. None of us are great at it. So I know your time is valuable.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's awesome to catch up with you guys. I appreciate you both.
Well, thank you. And thank you to everybody that listens. If you have any questions, as always, hit us up at podcast@volquartsen.com.